This is the New York Police Department's bomb squad. Part human, part dog, part robot, all one team.
Lethal and indiscriminate. To disarm one is to save countless lives.
NYPD bomb squad has given the all clear.
One reason the members of the oldest and biggest bomb squad in the United States are unique.
Bomb squad was able to safely remove a device.
When you don't see them, the NYPD bomb squad is always watching for that unsuspecting threat.
NYPD bomb squad racing in, then hauling away another suspicious package.
Package has been properly identified.
You're listening to Tales from the Boom Room. Profiles of the NYPD's arson explosion bomb squad.
So we decided to go in the apartment, and the issue entered it. And Paul and I, we were still back at the van. Our job wasn't to go in. Our job was just to be with the bomb, the bomb suits, and take care of the bomb after that. But all hell breaks loose. All I hear is gunfire and gunfire. And I looked at Paul. He looks at me, and I said, "Is that shots?" He goes, "I think so." Meanwhile, I had undressed, and I just put on what I wear underneath bomb suits, just a fire retardant suit. And I took off my gun. I put it in a bag, and I put it. I was going to leave that in the car, and I couldn't get the gun out fast enough. But finally, I reached in, I grabbed the gun, and me and Paul banked heads trying to get the gun. So I took off, and Paul, he didn't even bother with the gun anymore. He just he was going to stay with me. He was my wingman, Mm-hmm. So anyway, we ran into the back, and still shots going off. We hear shots. And it's really weird, though. In something like this, it changes time. First of all, everything slows up. You can't run fast enough. You can't do anything fast enough. And it changes sound. The bullets, the gunshots weren't like gunshots. They were like little caps going off, So it distorts a lot of things. And I don't know why, but I've had it happen before. Everything gets distorted. It's sort of, I don't know why that is. But that's not the first time. Other people talked about that, when you get into that situation. So it distorts things. So the things are a little distorted to me. But as I'm running up, and running down a hallway from the first building, and it led out to a courtyard into the second, and then this was the second building. There was a courtyard in between the two buildings, and they were behind that building in the second building. So I'm running full speed at this door, and this one guy shows up. I hear a couple of shots. He goes down at my feet, but he's in the doorway, and I'm running so fast I can't stop. So I jump over him, and then I go out and I'm out in the courtyard. And the other guy, he was standing there, and I heard a couple more shots. And then he was down, and all I could think about was, well, who can I shoot? So I look up, and there's a guy coming out of a window, but the issue is upstairs, and he decided he was going to bail out. Then he saw us all, so I pointed my gun up, and everybody pointed. So now he dives back into the window, but the issue took him. Now whether that's what happened, I don't know, because like I said, it gets distorted. One of the weirdest things is, you can have 20 people witness the same thing, and you're going to come with 20 different stories. So
yep.
That's just the way it is. So that's the way I saw it, and that's the way it went. Anyway, they pulled them out into the street, and they took them out of there, both guys, and EMS was working on them. They were both shot up, and I went into the apartment that was there. Can't say it was an apartment. It was more like a closet. This thing was a very small, maybe an 8 by 10 foot room, maybe at the most. 2 mattresses in there, side by side, and there was a TV in the corner as you come in on the right, and that was on top of a milk crate. And then there was a bag. There was a knapsack with the bomb in it, and then there was a bag. So I looked around, and I decided to take pictures of everything. I took pictures. I went outside. My CO came up, and I gave them the Polaroids. And I gave them. I go, "This is the way it looks now." I said, "I don't know what it's going to look, but at least you have something to go on. If it goes off, you'll know what it was, So we go back in there, and we let it cook for an hour because one switch was thrown. There was 4 switches on this device, so one was already the toggle switch was a different way. So we let it cook for an hour, and nothing happened. I said, "All right, now we go in. We'll look at this thing some more." And I cut open flap, picked up the flap, and all you could see was bombs and pipe bombs and wire. So there was balls of wire in there, and batteries. They had the big square batteries in there. They had 4 of them. So I said, all right, we'll start with this thing, start taking this apart. And as I'm taking it apart, it's other big, and the TV and all that stuff is in my way. So I said, you know, I want to remove the TV out, move that out, and then I went to pick up. It was it was like a milk crate, that they used as a table. I went to pick that up, and it was a wire, it was like a filament line, like a fishing line that ran off into another bag. And Paul whacked me in the head. So I can see his finger in front of my face. No. So I looked at this line. I said, okay, I put it back down. And we got an X-ray. We X-rayed that thing, and sure enough, there's another pipe bomb in there. Sort of like a booby trap. So now I have to stop working on the one, and then I got to go back to this because this was in my way. So I go out and I tell my boss again. I go, man, I'm gonna attack the other one first. He goes, no, I want you to do the main one. I go, it's in my way. The other one's in my way. I said, if I do that, I'm going to trip the other one. I'm not doing it that way. He goes, well, I'm telling you. I said, well, I'm telling you I'm not, and that's it. So we never saw eye to eye, but when my life's concerned, I'm not listening to him. I can tell you a story about him later on, but anyway, we went back and we finished off the secondary device, and we got that all out and apart and all that. So then we went back in for the other one. We continued working on that one, and the way I got it is there was a fire escape outside, or a stairwell that went up. And I ran a rope through it and hooked it onto the bag, and we pulled it back to the apartment. A couple of times I got stuck. I had to go back in. I just picked it up and moved it around the outfit, put his coat on. Anyway, we get it out and we turn it upside down and dump everything right onto the concrete, and then took it from there. Started taking everything apart, and called for the TCV, which is a total containment vehicle. Where if the bomb goes off in it, it doesn't cause any damage to anybody. In fact, all you hear is like a little crack. That's what you hear. Anyway, we called for that. And we took it apart, and piece by piece, we put everything in the TCV and closed it up. And basically, that was the end of it. We took it up to the range and took it all apart up there in a very safe manner. We had a good manner to take things apart up there. I had tools and everything else, so I didn't have to be near it. In fact, I had big concrete walls between me and it. It went off, and I had a suit on, and all that other stuff. So, the danger was over as far as taking this thing apart. But we took it all apart, minus the explosives. I put all the electric back together and put electric matches onto it, and then threw the switch, and they popped off. I said, oh. But I figured they weren't very good bomb makers, but I think it was a port. I think they used one ground for all 4 devices inside that one bag, and I just think it was a bad ground, and it did go off. That's the only thing I could
find yourself in the units a couple months later. Did the fact that the squad was busy with this investigation, you feel, help you learn how to be a bomb technician quicker, given the fact that they were so busy analyzing the components of what had happened?
Yeah, being in emergency service, you learn a lot of things what the bomb squad does. And one of the first things that we were trained to do is to dress the bomb tech that's going to go down on target for the job. So that was one of the first things. And when you do stuff like that, you want to make sure that the suit's on properly, that his air's coming in. He has plenty of air coming into the helmet. He's comfortable. Everything is the way it should be. He has his tools. So it's not only his partner helps out, but in emergency, this is one of the first things that we learned. So just being with the bomb technicians, you learn, and you just like when we got into emergency, we were with people that were in emergency service, so we were kind of helping them out, anything that they needed, anything that they wanted and stuff. I remember, if anybody remembers, Bridget Gurney, when the crane fell, and there was it was like in the 50s off of Madison Avenue, and we were asked to go up to the roof because they needed like aspirin, Advil, stuff like that, because the guys were up on this roof with a crane that had toppled over, and so we looked around and we says, this is interesting, and we ended up getting there. And the same thing like with the bomb squad, you develop a rapport. Every once in a while, we'll go to Rodman's Neck, where the bomb squad is located, when they do their render safe procedures or demolition. And you get to see these people more often, rub elbows with them, share information, and once they know what kind of person you are and this and that and everything else, and you get to know each other, it's like they call it like Truck 11, because a lot of officers, detectives that were in emergency service did go to the bomb squad if they chose.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about this. They had pins in there, for more shrapnel. This here is definitely a blasting cap.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it in here, and this is the C4 itself, and this is your battery.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is your little pull switch. When you take out the envelope, it sends juice into the battery, and the battery is going to set the blasting cap off, and then the blasting cap here will set off the Semtex. That's a much better shot. There's nothing really destroyed, but they did have pins in these things. I forgot all about that.
Paul, what can you add?
No, I concur. The same thing. The battery pack and the switching mechanism, like a gift card, and I remember the pins, and the blasting cap was bent like squashed like elliptical. Wasn't round, wasn't cylindrical. It was more elliptic, kind of like an egg shape, kind of. And to do something like that, it's pretty nervy to put any pressure on a blasting cap. They're so sensitive to even static electricity.
Was there anything, without giving any secrets away, of course, for you, Don, that was raising your eyebrow prior to this incident in regards to terrorism around the world and the potential for incidents in New York?
Nothing directly. I was very fortunate. I had liaison, of course, with the UN from working there prior. I also had an excellent relationship with the Israelis. I had an excellent relationship with the Brits and the Canadians, and with the State Department. By this time, I had my clearances, and I'm not going to say the name of our contact, but the guy from the State Department in the New York field office was just outstanding. I would come down every 2 weeks and was allowed to be briefed on anything that might even relate to the bomb squad. And what I had to do as kind of rules of the game, you can't use the names of anybody named in a report, from overseas. But I could use the name of a group. I couldn't say who the bomb maker was, but that they were active doing stuff in Europe or doing stuff in the Middle East. And I would put a report together and bring it back to the bomb squad and put it up on a clipboard in the back room and just try to make sure all the teams, when I had a chance, take a look at it. This is the latest intelligence I was able to bring back. And that's pretty much how I operate.
Like I had that guy. This was one of my favorites. Where this guy, his name is Volt Rotz. He was down by Co-op City, and Co-op City had a bunch of airbags being stolen in the cars, and you had two police officers, anti-crime from the 45th precinct, looking around, and they saw this guy, the disheveled-looking guy, in the area, and they went to talk to him, and during the course of talking to him, he started lying to them, and the next thing you know, they're getting physical, and he's fighting with these guys, and he had a machine gun and a 38, bunch of knives. He had a bunch of improvised explosive devices strapped to his chest. He had a radio listening to the 4-5 frequency, and we later found out this guy was like a commando in Eastern Europe, and he basically was kicking all these guys' teeth in, all these cops, and they got lucky where while they were fighting, a guy that lived in Co-op City was coming off a city bus. He was a construction worker. He came up behind the guy and grabbed him, gave the cops enough time to call for backup. But I mean, you got more cops coming. He was tased, and he went through all this, and he basically took on a bunch of cops and fought them. And I'm not talking about pulling, struggling. I'm talking about strikes and blows. And, then he was taken off to Lincoln Hospital to be treated. And, he beat up the cop guarding him. And while all this is going on, I had just moved into my house. One of our guys, Mike Rooney, had retired, and they were having a a party for him. Mike was a volunteer fireman in Long Island, and my wife wasn't feeling great, so I didn't go to the party. And when the call for this came in, Mark Torrey, who was the CEO of A&E, is now the CEO of the Bomb Squad. He's like, "Hey, I need you to go over to the 4-5 and take a look at this. Everybody out here is, at the party. They're drinking, they're partying. I can't send anybody in." And it made it sound like it was not a big deal. And when I got there, I mean, it was a monster. And I spent a long time with this guy, found that he had buried weapons and explosives in City Island. And I mean, it was a tremendous case. A lot of interesting things with this guy. He was a survivalist living on the island. I mean, when we went to his encampment, we had to take him back out there with us with the Hannibal Lecter chains on and everything. And he said, "I can show you where it is on a map, but I've got tripwires and booby traps all over the place with explosives." So we had to bring in the bomb squad. And, here it is. You're in the middle of City Island. It looks like you're trolling through the Vietnam forest, jungle rather, and to defuse this. And we had to have the bomb squad come in and do all this. And when we got to his camp, we found bags of fingernails, bags of clothing, bags of jewelry, women's clothing. And I'm thinking, my God, we've got a serial killer here. And I mean, we did all this going on, and I mean, and nobody wrote about it. And we sent out the stuff through the chains of command. And I mean, for whatever reason, like I said, the press picks up on it or they don't. It sounds sexy or it doesn't. Yeah, you know better than I do, but I couldn't believe something like that didn't. I mean, at that point, I was thinking I've got a serial killer with me. It ended up being it was his nails, his hair, and all the stuff that he'd find. He used to take a metal detector and go around the beach and collect stuff, and it wasn't dangerous at all. But and it's funny because once we got him medicated at the hospital, he was a normal guy again. He was fine. I actually had to have he said Ron Kuby was his lawyer, and I had to have Kevin Perret call Ron Kuby at the radio station. Say, "Do you know this guy?" So, hey, Kevin.
Back to A&E in March of '97. You almost got tested. No, not almost. You did get tested right away because 4 months later is when Paul and Richie have that job out in Brooklyn, where they get a call in the middle of the night. They go out there. Eddie Hayes was out there too, who'll be on the show this Friday. And ESU does the raid, and they find these guys with the pipe bombs, and Paul and Richie render them safe. Now, I never got the A&E side of it, and here you are, a brand spanking new sergeant, not on the job, but in that unit when these two guys stopped what would have been the nation's first suicide bombing. What was A&E's role in the Brooklyn job back in '97?
Okay, so I can tell you, when you get tested like this, so Jerry Sheen just started vacation, and so did John Santos. They were both out of the office. And so
wow,
I was the only supervisor working. What happened was I get a phone call from the wheel. What happened? The perps were already at Kings County Hospital, and I had 4 detectives, so I sent 3 detectives to the scene, and then 1 detective to Kings County to meet me. I wanted to see if I could talk to these guys. And there was a night watch detective watching them in the emergency room. By the time I got there, one was already up in the operating suite, and the other one was being prepped to go up to the operating suite. And when you say, some of your funny moments on a job, well, I'm asking the detective, is there anything? He says, all he kept on asking for what time it was. He wanted to know what time. He must have asked it 100 times. So I'm thinking in my head, there may be another device out there on a timer or another team, another cell that was going to go do something also. This could be a coordinated thing. So I get that information back to where it needed to go. I knew right away that really, more than likely, this wasn't going to be an A&E case, that this was going to go to the Joint Terrorist Task Force, because they were in our division at the time. They were in our division as well. They were a sister squad. So a lot of times, jobs like this, we both are there working the case together, so they say, because you got the feds involved. And then all of a sudden, they'll make a decision which way it's going to go. And wherever the chips lie, you're stuck with what's ever in the paper there, you know. So as I'm trying to question this guy, a young doctor, you know, probably a resident, was telling me that I couldn't question the patient, that she's there to save a life. And I says, well, so am I. And I says, I am. And I want you to keep him alive. As long as it takes for him to tell me what's so important about 9 o'clock. He's asking if it's 9 o'clock. And our argument got a little vocal. And there was an old-time nurse there who saw what was going on, and she grabbed this young doctor and spirited her away and said, we need you over here. This patient has a severe wound. And the nurse looked over my shoulder and just gave me the nod. Like, go ahead, go and ask your questions. There was an anesthesiologist that was there that was ready to prep this guy. And he goes, in 30 seconds, you could ask him anything you want. I asked him. So these two guys actually came over. They were part of Hamas.
Yeah, they were Palestine guys.
Yeah, they were Palestinians. They just got there. And one of the things I guess one of the guys may have discussed was on the vest. Very fortunate for the ESU guys that went into that apartment and took that down, was that they put 4 safety switches on the vest.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy's hand, when it swiped down, because he tried to actually detonate it, his hand came down and only 2 of the toggles were hit. If the other 2 would have been hit also, the bomb would have went off and killed everyone in that
bomber
room.
In the subway, an attempted bomber in the subway, in which he had, I believe you told me, and we'll dive into it right now, 2 bombs on him. One went off, and I think that one killed him. But one was still alive, and here he is, a corpse with the live bomb on it. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, 1988, we got a call to go up to 125th Street and 3rd Avenue, which was the subway system. Apparently, prior to our arrival, there was an explosion, and when they went over to where it was, there was a man down, and he was on fire, and his chest had exploded on one side. But he had another device on his other side. He had the stereo wires and everything else. So when we got there, Phil Brown was the other bomb tech that I was working with that day. We couldn't use the robot. We couldn't get the robot into the situation. So we had to do what it's called a hand entry. So we had to go in there, even though one side of him had been blown away and he was dead, there was still another pipe bomb on the other side that had to be diffused because it didn't go off when the other one went off. So you have a hang fire and you don't know why it caused that. So we had to go in and we had to trace the wires according to where it was and had to figure out where it was the center of the battery operated situation. And then we had to diffuse it based on that. And that's how we were able to diffuse it. That man was never identified. Interpol and everybody else had no recollection of who he was. He was a young man, approximately 35 years old. Must have caused the explosion because he had the device on him and he had the speaker wires on his wrist. And I think the way it was supposed to go was he was supposed to hug somebody and cause the wires to complete the circuit and kill him and the person that he was hugging. And he must have came down the subway platform and he hit the stairs and he must have, one of the wires must have hit the metal on the stairwell and that caused it to explode. And that's what caused him to die right then and there. But one of them went off and one of them didn't. So we had to defuse that one.
And I'm walking down, I get to the corner of Vesian Church, and what was funny, there was Claude standing right there with his blue helmet on and his jumpsuit. And I'm looking at him going, what are you doing here? He says, that office, it's a zoo. It's crazy up there. I said, oh, okay, all right. And then on the other corner, as I'm standing there, you're looking at a whole set of landing gear sitting there, and you knew that from Flight 800. So you're sitting, this is a fiasco, and you can smell the fuel and everything else. With that, Danny pops up. He's standing there, and Kevin Barry and Michael Mixon, they dropped the truck right on the corner of Vesey and Church. And okay, so we're like, okay, let's put something together, and we're trying to figure out, everybody's trying to interject something in that. So the game plan is, what we're going to do is we're going to go up the stairs, and as we're going up, more guys start popping up. And again, I know Steve Lanos came from the truck, it came flying down, but as we're walking across the street, we get stopped by a couple of people that we knew from the first Trade Center. This is what was crazy. But what happened was Danny, come on, we got to keep going. We got to keep going. So the one guy stops us and he grabs Kevin and I. Kevin's standing there. And again, he's like, we're going to get going. But we talked to this guy to see if we get some information. And he goes, he's from the ATF. And he says, typical cop, black humor. Do you believe this? I lost another car in the garage again. Okay, because what happened in the first one? All the feds lost their cars in the garage. So he says that. He says, I lost another car. Again, the little black humor. But at that time, the boys, they separated and they got up ahead of us. And I'm watching them going up the stairs. Like Kevin goes, come on. So we start going up the stairs and everything else. And then Mike was with Claude and Danny, and they're going off, and then they made a right, and I saw them going through a mezzanine. They disappeared. With that, a body came flying down, and we're standing there, and Kevin, we look up, and we're going, all of a sudden, you heard, it sounded like, if you ever watched the old World War II submarine movies, when they shoot depth charges, a very faint banging noise you heard. And it was like, what the heck? You heard like a boom, and you heard it going, and it started going, boom, boom. Looking up, and I'm watching a piece of stainless steel. I'm stopped, looking at a piece of stainless steel come down like a leaf, but a person's going flying right by it. And with that, Kevin's going, the building's coming down, Brian. And I go, oh, God. Now I'm looking where they went, and they went in, and we're not going to make it that way. I came back down the stairs, and I went over to the Catholic Church. I was looking at the FBI federal building there, and knowing from emergency service, the train school, you have manways in the subways. If you go into the manway, the train don't hit you. So I figured if I go in there, the building slides down in front of me, I won't get hit with a piece of concrete or anything. But I couldn't get over that way, so I went into the church over there, the Catholic Church. And as I made the turn, I got there, and the building is flying down. And Kevin went straight, and for some strange reason, I heard maybe 2 shots, and maybe something else happened. I don't know if Kevin was involved in that, but maybe the door went down, and he got into the deli on the corner, and I got into the church. With that, all you saw was the dust coming by and everything going by us and everything like that. And with that, there was a French film crew in there, and an emergency lieutenant came in with his shoulder all screwed up. I had a big gash, and being a former altar boy, I went up and took the sheets, the corporal, and I had to off and used the holy water just to wash him down a little bit. And then I went back outside. So he was being taken care of by somebody else, but he had a large gash in his shoulder. And as I came out, all of a sudden you heard the jets flying over, and I dove under an emergency truck. I don't know why. I landed under the emergency truck thinking maybe another plane was coming in for the next pass. We get up, and all you got is that white dust and everything all over the place. And I'm going, now I know they went up, but you couldn't get up there anymore. And with that, it got really crazy. Now you see the building's gone, it's down. And then Kevin comes over and he's looking at me like, we got to do something. I said, yeah, we got to do something. Which way do we go? We don't know which way to go because you can't see anything. And next thing I hear my name called, and I'm going, well, I don't know if it's Jesus Christ, but somebody's calling me here. And with that, who is it? But it's a gentleman by the name of Manny Morales. And again, I didn't explain to you, Staten Island being where all the chiefs and everybody come from, the highway unit became the more or less the wheelmen for all the first steps in the PC's office. The first step, the PC, all of them through the years always came out of Highway 5 because they lived on the island. Well, this gentleman I worked with when he was there is a highway officer. He's now a sergeant in, in the first steps office. And he's coming out of the fog and out of this mess. And he goes to me, he says to me, hey, you got a car here? And I look at Kevin, do we still have the keys to the wagon? He says, I have a set, Mike's got a set. And I said, oh, okay, what do you need them for? He says, I got the boss with me. I'm going, you got the boss? What do you mean you got the boss? He says, he's standing right there with a pair of crutches under him and he's got a cast on him. And his other two bodyguards are with him. And I go, all right, so what do you need? He's the highest political person in the city that's still alive that we know. We thought we lost Giuliani and we lost Carrick. We thought they were gone because they were on the other side when things went down. That's what Manny told me. I'm sitting there going, so he's now the PC and the mayor or whatever you want to. He said, yeah. I said, okay. So we grab him. As I grab him, I said, come on, you gotta go up to MPP. He goes, I'm not going anywhere. And he starts directing. Joe Dunn is directing everybody with the crutches and everything. And I said, sir, you're the last guy in charge. We need you up in 1PP. He goes, no. Well, his guy's got in the back of 3501 and he's standing there and they're yelling at me, get him in the car, get him in. I take my fist and I hit him in the chest straight on to get him in the car. He gets in the car. He's looking at me like, you hit me. I said, get in the goddamn car. That's what you got to do. With that, Kevin took us up to 1PP. With that, we put him in there and we left. We came back to the office. When we got back to the office, Stevie Berberich was sitting on the wall holding his knee. Joe Dolan blew a knee out, holding his knee. Danny's sitting there and he was holding his shoulder or his elbow or something. He had a cut or something. And I'm counting and I said, okay, where's Danny? He's gone. What? He's gone. And they might not remember saying it, but they said it very softly. And these guys were hurting. They were hurting. So they were in there. I was outside. As I'm pushing Dunn into the car, the second building lets go, and it's falling right on us. A piece of it hits the back of 3501 as we're leaving with him in the front seat. I know it sounds corny to laugh, but it was like, how lucky can you be if two buildings fall on you? I'm sorry, but it was crazy. So we come back, and that's when I found out that we lost him. And I saw him, and I talked to him, and everything. And it just bothers me that I should have been there, and that's that. And it was a long day after that, going back and forth, up and down, doing what we got to do.
You know what? I want to make mention of this because we were talking about this off the air. You mentioned working with the Bureau of Fire Investigations. Of course, that is the Fire Marshal's office for those that may not know. And a lot of the arsons, a lot of the, the explosions, you guys are working jointly on that. And you and Louis Garcia, who will be on this show soon, are very good friends. And you two basically rewrote the manual on how to jointly investigate. Because back then, the PD and the FD, now they relatively get along. But this was the era in which particularly you were seeing the rescue units and emergency service not get along. And basically to avoid having a repeat of that in the Detective Bureau, with their, Fire Investigations Bureau, you two teamed up and really consolidated things in a way that, has still to this day made those investigations a lot easier. So tell me about that without getting into the classified stuff, of course.
The last time there was a MOU was under Benjamin Ward, I believe, and it was getting old. It was getting a lot of problems in the field. Take, for instance, the Happy Land Social Club, right? 87 people were killed in the social club that night. Luckily, within 12 hours, Julio Gonzalez was arrested for the fire, but it worked out great. You have to have all the information going into one bucket. BFI can't be doing their thing, ATF doing theirs. The local detective squad who actually had lead in the case, and there'd be 4 different entities, if not maybe even feds coming in, other feds coming in. So you can't have that. All the information has to go into one bucket, and then from that information, you got to figure out what steps you want to take next. Do you want to interview this person, or would interviewing him maybe give something up? Do you want to hit a search warrant or not? You have to have strategies that are going to work. So to make sure this worked, Louis and I was from PD, Louis from FD, to try to get a working agreement with both jobs. Because the fire marshal, Bureau of Fire Investigation, they're professionals, and they're chartered by the city charter, that they're the only ones that are allowed to do a cause and origin out of fire. We, in turn, A&E will go on to maybe a little bit later, we got our guys to be, we feel, parallel as far as being able to determine a cause and origin, even though by the city charter we're not allowed to do it on paper for the city. So we can question, we could talk with the BFI guys and say, well, what about this and what about that? So this MOU was so that when you get on the scene, like I said, BFI professional people, there's an important case, come down, they want to have that case, but for some reason, A&E is going to come in and grab it from them. So there had to be a reason for it. And that's what that MOU brought out. You have to figure BFI guys, they started as fire investigators, as firemen, then they became investigators and they get trained. And maybe they're in that position for a year or so, where some of the A&E guys or ATF guys have been doing it for 8-10 years. And they have a lot of other backup units to help them out, support systems. So with this did, it kind of lined out, okay, BFI, you get these cases, arson explosion, you get the other ones. So when something did happen, you didn't have to go there and argue about it. Whoever the fire department supervisor was would know, okay, that's not ours or it is ours. And if we got there and we saw that it fell on the Bureau of Fire Investigation, we would just help them out and they would get the case. And hopefully it wouldn't be, it could get very argumentative out in the field, and also it could lead to a bad case because you're both going in different directions and all the evidence isn't coming into one bucket. As
phone is sometime maybe 1:15 in the morning, and I was a female detective, and she's telling me that they have a person in the squad room that came from a residence and was explaining in broken English that there's some people, students that were in the room and that sharing an apartment, and they had been constructing devices, and he left and he wanted to call. Well, he wanted to advise. He found police officers in the street. I think they were transit police officers, and to advise them that, before these guys wake up, this is what they're doing. And then, the rest is history. They brought him into the squad room.
Joe was given the key to get in the place, and Joe puts the key in the door. And go ahead, Dave. Tell him what happened. Go ahead.
He turns the key, and he looks at me like a big puppy that he is. He looks at me and goes, "Dave, I think I locked the door." So I look at him and I said, "Well, open the effing door and let's go." And it was, despite all that tension, despite all of what we're going through, it was a moment of laughter almost, like of all things to lock the door. And
safety first.
Yeah. The whole problem with the open door was I kind of put myself in these guys' position that if I'm making bombs to use tomorrow, why am I leaving my door unlocked? So that kind of, while we were all chuckling about me locking the door when we're trying not to tip them off that we're coming in, and I figured that maybe we weren't going to get past that door to begin with. So, but at that point, Dave summed it up the best. We've unzipped our fly. They know we're coming. So let's go. So you got to go at that point. You can't stop now. So I shoved the door open, and nothing happened. So we ended up making the entry, and it was laid out exactly the way the guy explained it. So go ahead, Dave. You can go on with this.
Yeah, Joey opens the door. We go in. I see the two individuals at the other end of the room sleeping on a cot, and the one gets up. He starts to. Abu Meza came charging towards me. I shot him, and then Lafi Khalil gets up. And we're stepping on the bomb satchels themselves. We didn't even realize it, but he lunges towards me. I hit him midair. On his lunge, he dropped like a rock, and then Joey looks down and he's like, "Holy cow, we're standing on the bombs," So at that point, we cleared them out. We dragged them out all the way to the front, dropped them on the floor, went back in, and continued clearing the building out.
Actually swung out, so he had to be nimble to get that door open, holding a gun in a bunker to pull the door towards him. And when he did, I had Sergeant English behind me. And Dave isn't a little guy, and so he pretty much, with his vest on, took up the whole doorway. So I was standing behind him, and I heard the shots, so I knew something was going on, but I really couldn't see. I guess as one of them started to move, Dave had to move to the left, and as he did, I shoved past him and got into the room with Dave. And at that point, I saw the two individuals that Dave was dealing with, and the guy on the right. I ordered him, "Don't move, don't move." And he looked at me, and then he looked down at the ground, and then I looked down at the ground where he was looking, and that's where, very dim light, there was no real light in there. The only light that was in the room was the light of Dave's Glock, and just a little bit of sunlight coming through this window that had a covering on it. So it was a very dim lit room, but I could see a bag on the floor, and I looked at him, and he looked me straight in the face and lunged. And as soon as he started to move, I shot him twice. And at that point, he stopped his movement. Mini 14s have a habit of doing that to you.
And the two men that you mentioned, Jerry Sheehan and John Santos, they taught me an awful lot. And I looked around; they weren't there that morning. So now it was up to me to actually start saying, "Oh crap! I gotta like actually do this stuff without them stopping any mistakes." Because an investigation like this, I knew was going to wind up in the hands of the Joint Terrorist Task Force, but they bring arson and explosion in just in case it isn't. If they some way or somehow is deemed not a terrorist thing, then it's going to fall under the purview of an arson and explosion investigation. And also, I figured they called us for a fall guy in case things really went bad. Blame A&E. So I get the phone call. I tell guys to respond different places. I had very few detectives. It was the summertime. We're a small squad, so I had guys on vacation. So I had a couple of guys go to the scene. I had one detective respond with me over to Kings County, and I arrived at Kings County, and one of the perps was already in the operating suite, and the other one was in the ER, in the emergency room, and they were prepping him to go into an operating suite. With him, guarding him, was a night watch detective. And one of the things that the detective brought to my attention immediately was the fact that they were very interested in what time it was. And they kept on asking about 9 o'clock. And, now I needed to find out what this guy knew about 9 o'clock. So I wanted to question him a little bit. And there must have been she was a young female resident doctor that was working there. And she took exception to the fact that I wanted to question this man. And, I told her, I need to question him. I need to find out things that he knows and hopefully, prevent a tragedy. And she goes, well, I'm not interested in your job. My job is to save his life. And I told her, well, my job is to save his life too. And then hopefully it saves other people's lives. Then I don't care what you do to him. But right now, I'm going to talk to him. Well, in that same area of the emergency room was an old-time nurse. And she was standing there. She watched what was going on and knew that, well, this young doctor needed to get out of the way. So she went over there and told this young doctor that she was needed elsewhere. And she left. And then the next thing I see is an anesthesiologist or his assistant come walking over, and he says, in 5 minutes, you could ask him anything you want. So I found out that they just got came in from, they were Palestinian. They were part of Hamas. The 9 o'clock thing, I can never, get a handle on what the 9 o'clock thing was, other than there may have been another group. That was the only thing I could, kind of correlate together, because maybe there was another group that was going to go out, in conjunction with them. Because a lot of times with these cells, they work independently, or sometimes they can team up. So we had to be a little aware of that. I got the information back to the scene as quickly as possible to hope that that the guys, Paul and Richie, for rendering safe purposes, I didn't know if the device was still at the scene or not. But we certainly didn't want to be standing there at 9 o'clock, finding out that there was another device that was going to detonate something.
I'll tell the funnier version. Anyway, I heard shots. I asked Paul, "Is that shots?" He goes, "I think so." And then we heard some more, and then we knew. But we had stripped down already because it was a very, very, very hot night, and we were going to wear our bomb suits. So all the clothes came off, and we put on our it's a coverall,
No mech suits.
Yeah, a no mech suit. So we had wearing that, and I took my gun off. I put it in a bag. And he took his gun off. We went on an entry team. We trust emergency. They're going to take care of whatever. It's got to be shot, So anyway, we heard the shots, and we decided we're going to go in. Mario, he came out the door. It wasn't over the radio. He came out the door. He says, "Bomb squad, get in here." And I dove into my bag looking for my gun. And this is in the dark now. I grabbed the gun. I'm banging heads with Paul. He's trying to get his gun, but I got mine and I took off. Paul, like a good partner, always, he just forgot his gun and ran with me.
I couldn't find it.
So I'm running through the building now and around the staircase and out the back door. And one of the guys, it was I think it was Meza. I believe it was Meza. He came through the door as I'm going through it. This was the door out the front building into the courtyard. And I actually I was running so fast, we met face to face. I actually had to jump over him, and I wound up in the courtyard. Anyway, we went in and we looked at the bombs, and we told everybody, that's it, we're out of here. I saw there was 4 toggle switches, and one was thrown, and the other 3 were still in the off position. So I figured, well, we went outside, we talked over it, we talked about it, and we decided to let it cook for an hour. This way, if it heats up and it blows up, you give it an hour to do whatever it's going to do, So an hour later, we went in. I took a little Polaroid camera with me. I took pictures of the whole scene, of the devices, of the room, where everything was.
5 pictures. 5.
Yeah, I took 5
pictures.
And I went back outside. We went back outside, and we spoke to our lieutenant. And I gave him the pictures. I go, this is what it looks now. I said, I can't promise what's going to look.
And then we had 3 left.
So anyway,
2 disappeared.
We went back in and we looked at it. And we started taking it apart. And I turned to Paul. I said, Paul, do me a favor, get out of here. I don't want you in here with me. I said, I promise your mother. We've been partners. We've been partners for 20 years, on and off. I said, I promise your mother, I would always have you survive this thing. He said, but he wouldn't do it like the faithful partner he always was. So he stayed in with me, which thank God he did, because I was looking at the one package, and then I wanted to get, the room was very small and everything was in our way. We were wearing these big suits, so I started to clear around the package, and there was a TV set there. I took the TV set off, and it was on top of a very fancy milk crate, so for furniture. And I went to move the milk crate, and he taps me on the helmet, and I see his hand with no, because you don't really talk to each other because you have fans going on stuff. And I looked, and there was a filament line that ran off into another bag, and it was a booby trap. So I said, oh, man. So I said, okay. So I put the thing back, and we decided we're going to leave and go talk about this again. So we left, we come back in. And I told the lieutenant, I said, listen, we got a booby trap in there. It's blocking our way. He tells me, he says, well, I want you to take care of that first package first. I go, no, I'm not doing that because it's in my way. This other thing is in my way. So he thought about it, and he goes, oh, okay. I said, well, thanks a lot. I'm doing the show, So anyway, we went back in and opened up the flap. We saw everything, and we figured we're going to go with the ropes and tie it off and drag it out into the courtyard where we have a better look at it, And we can use the robot also. So we went from ropes to robots. We use all kinds of modern and old technology on this stuff. There was a staircase that came down, and I put the rope through the staircase. And I pulled the package out. He got caught up, right, Paul? He got caught up when I had to go back in. I picked up the bomb and moved it around.
Yeah, we used the traffic cone. We used the traffic cone to get around the corners. It got stuck.
Yeah. So anyway, we got it out, and I roped it so that it went upside down and dumped everything right out, so I didn't have to go through the bag. It was all wires and four big batteries, the big square batteries, and 6-volt batteries, and 4 pipe bombs. Well, the other one too, we had to take care of that. There was a pipe bomb in there, and that had match heads in it. So, but anyway, we rented that safe, and we went on to the other one. So, and we used your robot on that. The thing that saved us is after it was all over and all said and done, I took it apart and minus the explosives, and I put everything back together, all the switches, and I put electric matches in where the bombs were connected to the bombs. I threw the switches, and they all went off. So I said, this guy just failed electricity 101.
It's a Polaroid picture. How good could it be? But we were able to see that filament line in those pictures to look for it, when we went in there to render it safe, to remove it. So I guess it was a learning experience for everybody, in and out of the house.
The one thing I'd like to say before I forget. Sure. About 4 years ago, maybe 5, 6, 5, no more than 5. I realized that guys are getting really sick from exposure to 9/11. And what happened was I reached out to Gene Kelly, was running the stuff through at the time. I can't remember exactly. I know she worked at at a hospital that was dealing with a lot of guys that were coming down with the cancers. And I went with my wife. I had to actually go with my wife because the PTS kicked right back in me having to talk about this stuff. But I sat down with Jean and my wife. I talked to her on the phone. I think she told me to bring my wife. I think she could hear it just talking to me at the time. And, she talked me into getting tested, getting the 9/11, whatever the heck it's called now. I can't think now. But registered with them and getting tested. I do have sleep apnea really bad. They put me. They sent me for testing for that. Put me. Gave me the CPAP and supplied me with that, and also the acid reflux, real bad. My understanding, not knowing at the time, but Gene had said that the spike in acid reflux, which leads to esophageal cancer and other things, is pretty high. And I went down for initial testing, X-ray, I guess, of my lungs, and what they found out that I had was an aneurysm on my heart. 9/11 doctor says, well, your heart, your lungs are good. You got one spot, and it's so big, and it's not that big, but you do have an aneurysm on your heart. You better seek medical attention for that. Of course, I go to my doctor. He sends me to a heart specialist, and he sent me to a thoracic surgeon, tell me, what I have to do to avoid this aneurysm getting any bigger. But I wouldn't have known this. But other guys too, the same thing. Make sure you get out there. People that were down there exposed to that stuff, including civilians. Plenty of civilians coming down with these crazy cancers. The spikes are high. I talked to people about it, and they said, well, how do they know? How do they know it came from there? It's because the spikes in the New York area are tremendous, as opposed to California and Colorado and all these other places that, people that came down there for just an hour. I was exposed to those fumes, and luckily I had a mask on. I had a mask in my jump bag that I put on. What do you call it? A decent mask, but that got clogged. But I still took some stuff in there. But again, go out and get tested. A couple hours out of your life, a day or two, whatever it takes. Get registered. My understanding, there will be only so much time that you could get, get tested.
I have in front of me here a review of recorded data from long range and airport surveillance radars revealed multiple contacts of airplanes or objects in TWA Flight 800's vicinity at the time of the accident. None of these contacts intersected the flight's position at any time. It's natural to have other planes in the air. Obviously, that part is not anything particularly nefarious, but attention was drawn to data from the Islip, New York area air traffic control facility that showed 3 tracks in the vicinity of the flight that did not appear in any of the other radar data. None of these sequences intersected the flight's position at any time either. All the reviewed radar data showed no radar returns consistent with the missile or other projectile traveling towards the flight. But that, again, it kind of flies in the face of what was said by witnesses, of course, in their testimony of that night. And I will add this, and then I'll let you comment on it. Trace amounts of explosive residue were detected on 3 samples of material from 3 separate locations of the recovered airplane wreckage, described by the FBI as a piece of canvas-like material and 2 pieces of a floor panel. These samples were submitted to their laboratory, which they have down in Washington, D.C., which determined that 1 sample could trade traces of RDX, another nitroglycerin, and the third a combination of RDX and PETN. And they received, of course, much media attention for those findings at the time. Are those explosives that were found consistent with the projectile or a missile, Kevin?
I would have to say yes, but I'm not sure about the manufacturing. Was it a foreign produced item that we could be talking about, or was it U.S. made? And that would change the variation on the explosive content. If a missile or a handheld rocket was fired and it came from the Czech Republic, more than likely it would be Semtex as the explosive charge. Right. So it depends on where the suspect item came from, if in fact it was a missile. And one thing I can tell you is that 6 weeks into the hangar reconstruction, it was at least 6 weeks or more, I was asked to talk with the FBI and the CIA agent that was coming up to do this video. And they laid out the radar map hits for all the targets that were in the area. And I had heard a story about a guy that was on, I'm not sure if it was a U.S. Air flight, but it was a flight that was at 21,000 feet, and it was southeast of the track of TW-800. TW-800 going due east, and this aircraft at 21,000 feet was headed northeast. Mm-hmm. And the story in the news said that he was a combat veteran who rang the call bell several times and hurriedly told the flight attendant to tell the captain he saw what appeared to be a missile launch from below. And I believe he was seated on the starboard side of the aircraft. So 800 would have been on the port side view, headed towards, crossing in front of this northeastbound aircraft that was at least 8,000 feet above 800. And I believe that was reported, and I think it's somewhere in the confines of the investigation. Mm-hmm. Now, when they came and they showed this radar hit, sure enough, that aircraft was on the radar hit. So that confirmed the story with me that there was an aircraft at 21,000 feet. Then below that, there were two other idents that I saw, and I asked what they were, and they're only described by numbers and letters. And they said, well, the first one, that's a Black Hawk helicopter. Mm-hmm. And then trailing it, not too far behind, in fairly close proximity, I said, what is this one? And they said, that's a P-3 Orion. Now, P-3 Orion is a subchaser. So now we have a Black Hawk helicopter traveling, and I said, at what speed? And the speed was 33 point something knots, being followed by a P-3 Orion. I said, what are they doing right there? Because prior to this, that area had been closed to military operations, that airspace. It had just been reopened, according to reports that we were told when we were at the hangar.
Who was doing the test? Which branch? Do you know?
I believe it was Naval Ops.
Okay.
And in some recent disclosures, the Navy has now apparently come forward and said there were at least 3 submarines in the area. Now, that would account for the P-3 Orion for tracking purposes. Well, why is somebody flying the fastest, most maneuverable helicopter in the armed forces or the air forces or the Marines at only 33 knots, unless they were observing something or running some type of operation?
We're squaring away a lot of really, good evidence. We're finding pieces of pressure cookers. We're finding some other pieces, finding a lot of shrapnel, a lot of BBs, a lot of ball bearings. And we were very fortunate to have the amount of staff that we had with us. So as we're working the scene all night long, I mean, I think it's about 2:00 in the morning, and I'm walking down the block with evidence recovery team members, and we're just pointing stuff out. And sure enough, we look down and there's a label. There's actually a label for the explosive that they used. So that was a great find for us, because we were going back and forth on whether it was high explosives or low explosives, and it turned out to be high explosives. And I actually had to buy Lieutenant Torrey a case of beer on that. Because we had a lot of people asking, a lot of big bosses, what is it? What I'm like, honestly, sir, I cannot give you that answer. I'm not a laboratory. And I swabbed a lot of stuff that night, and we sent it out to the lab. And sure enough, it was high explosives. And I gave Mark a case of beer. He's like, what are you doing? You can't give me a case of beer. I'm like, no, I lost a bet. You said it was high explosives. I said it was low explosives. I said it could have been a large amount of low explosives, and it could have been a decent amount of high explosives. And I said, you were right. He's, you're nuts or whatever. So I ended up, I gave him a case of beer on that one. And that's always an old bomb tech thing. If you kind of foul up on the range, or if you trip something up, or even if you spell something wrong, case of beer is what you owe. So, but that's old.
And the lieutenant's case of cigar too. I know he loves cigars.
Yes. But all he got was a case of beer on that one. So, on our scene, as we're working and we're finding a lot of little stuff. So Steve Sansone was my partner. I'll give you a little bio on Steve Sansone. So Steve, when I interviewed him to come into the squad, I saw this kid who was just super bright and just wanted to absorb information. And him and I worked together a lot. And when I did his interview and picked him up, I interviewed a few ESU guys also, who I also loved them, and we picked up also. So these guys go to school, and Mark asked me, he says, Paulie, he says, senior guy, who do you want for your team? And I said, give me the highway kid. And he's like, highway kid? He's like, you're an E-man. He says, why would you pick the highway kid? You got all these other emergency guys. I said, there's something about this guy. I said, this guy he wants to learn everything we do. And I'm proud of him. I tell you what. And him and I, we worked that scene. I mean, and ever since then, I mean, he's done nothing but advance in the bomb squad. He's like a number one guy on the stabilization team. He knows what he's doing. He just loves it, and real proud of him. So that night, he finds the IEMI tag from the phone, which was like a literal needle in the haystack.
I was just about to say that. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Oh, bomb debris everywhere, and he finds this tiny little tag that identifies the phone and where it came from. And sure enough, that ended up linking. At least it definitely linked the two devices. Well, we kind of guessed that the two pressure cookers were going to be, and also New Jersey. So just little things like that, just being so alert and astute to your craft. Like he found that, and we just kept moving all night long. We just kept going and going and going until we were to leave the next morning. And so now the next morning, I'm not there. I forget what I was doing. I'm not sure if I stayed there for the whole full tour or I was relieved sometime in the afternoon. But we're still holding down that area. Now we're searching buildings. We're going through windows. Actually, we had ESU and fire department bringing us ladders to get into buildings, and that had just been damaged and had been abandoned or under construction, and we had no way to get into them. So we just we went in through the holes that were blown in the windows. And we were still finding stuff all night long. So now the morning or the afternoon is now, it's Sunday. And we don't normally do range operations on Sunday, just to keep the people of City Island happy and, not blowing stuff up on, give them a little peace on a Sunday, right? But now this is important, and there's a range operation going. So Lieutenant Torrey and Sergeant Connolly, Jay, Timmy, a handful of other guys. Tony Mason was a range safety officer at the time. They decide that they're going to render this device safe, and they were going to try and open it remotely with the robot, which was very difficult. And the top of it was actually kind of gacked up, so they really couldn't just spin the top of this off. So they decided to do the action that I had mentioned, and they disrupted it. I'm not going to go into what that is, but they disrupted it. And when it opened up, this had a homemade explosive mixture and pretty much what we would call a cleanup shot, time fuse and light bulbs and like pretty much everything that was like on his workbench. He kind of swept into the pressure cooker, and he had enough explosives in it for it to high order and to make everything go away. So, or make everything very small. So they ended up getting that open after a bit, and some nice a nice shot, they get it open and they collect all the evidence for that one. They did get a lot of stuff that we had also on our device, which was great because we were able to do a comparison. So now the whole case is for the FBI now. So now it's their case, and they did a fantastic job on the prosecution end of it. And fortunately, he's in jail right now, which is I think he's in jail. He's in jail. He's not dead. He's in jail. So
he can get consecutive life sentences too.
Yeah,
he's never getting out.
No.
With the next transmission, I realized what was going on, and the transmission was, I believe, he said, it's not a secondary explosion. It's a second plane into the South Tower. Central, you better notify somebody because New York is under attack. And with that, the counting to 3 started again, and we made the 20-yard dash across to go into the tower. And Roger Mack was there, another great guy. He's another guy into the bomb squad from emergency service, and he's there. He's in front of me, and like I said, Lieutenant Holyfield, and there were a few other guys. And I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was. It was extremely frantic at that point. So we go in and we start climbing up the stairs, and we get about 4 or 5 flights up, and you can hear things going on in the building and stuff. And I thank Lieutenant Holyfield to this day, if he's listening to this. He turned around and he looked at me and said, "Joe," he says, "you can't come with us." He says, "You have no equipment." And he was right. And I knew he was right. He says, "You have no equipment. You have no Scott pack. You have no rope. You have no belt. You have no nothing." And he was right. I didn't have that because I wasn't in emergency anymore. So I wouldn't have that. And I felt bad for poor Roger because he says, "Give the medical bag to Roger." And Roger just looks at me, because the medical bag isn't light, and that's what I had over my head when we were running across to go into the tower. So Roger, I look at Roger, I go, "Oh, I'm sorry, man." He goes, "Yeah, thanks, Joe." So I throw the medical bag over his back on top of the Scott pack, and they continue to climb. I don't know how far up they got into the building, but they all made it. I went back downstairs now, and there were people milling around. As I came back down the stairs, there were people milling around, not knowing where to go. So I sent them out towards West Street. And like I said to you pre-show, this is not an I, me. This is all team effort and stuff. This was the point where it was pretty much me on my own at this point. So I sent them out towards West Street, and because I knew what they were going to have to run through if they made it and they went out to the right. West Street went out to the left from where we were. And if they went out to the right, they were going to have to go through what I just came through coming in. And I didn't want to send them that way because I was afraid that it would slow them down too much. First of all, I don't know if they would have made it out of that doorway, seeing what was laying out there. So I sent them out to the point where I wasn't sure what was out there, but I was pretty sure it was going to be better than what was to the right. So I stood there for a while and I pushed them out, and I came back out of the building. I went to the right. I had already come through there. I went to the right and walked, and that's where I ran into Mike Olmixon and Kevin. So Kevin said to Mike, he says, "Go back up to the office with Joe and get get I can't remember what we went up there to get. We went up there to get something. He says, go pick up some equipment, that we can use up to the bomb squad office. And while we were there, Stevie Berberich was there, and Danny McNally was there, and Claude Richards showed up, and he pulled a pair of boots down off the locker, and he says, I got these at the last World Trade Center. I'm finally going to get to wear them. And he puts on his jumpsuit and his boots, and Faith turns around and says, you got to stay here and help me answer these phones. And he goes, no. He says, I'm going down there. So all of us got in the van again and headed down, and that's when the first tower came down. And we continued down. The smoke had somewhat dissipated, but the debris on the ground, the soot on the ground was about 3 inches thick when we pulled up, and we parked the van, and we got out. Mike had dropped his dog off. I believe he had his dog with him at first, and he left his dog at the bomb squad office. I think, I don't know, the dog may still have been there. I'm not sure now. But we get out of the van, and everybody's talking about what they want to do, and Danny Richards says, well, let's go and help them do the rescues. And I think Stevie turns around and he says, well, he says, we're in the bomb squad. We should be doing, something else. And I think Danny Richards looked at him and he says, Steve, we got nothing. He says, we got to help people. And Steve goes, you're right, Danny. He says, I don't know what I was thinking. And we all ended up going. He said, where should we go? And I said, well, the last time I was here, I know Mike Curtin and guys from emergency were up in the, I know where Mike Curtin was. I said, I know where they are. Let's go up there. And he says, okay. So we went up there, up the escalator again, past all that crap that was there, and we ran into Mike Curtin, and we were standing there, and as we're trying to put together our game plan and seeing what somebody needs, I looked over to my right, and just as I did, I could see some emergency guys, and a piece of metal came down and hit Lieutenant Murphy in the arm, and I could see it was bad right away. It almost severed his arm from the shoulder down. I believe it was from the shoulder down. It looked like it was from the shoulder down. So I saw that, and I ran over to help him. And at that point, Steve Lanos, who ended up in the bomb squad from emergency service, also came over, and I clamped down on the top of Lieutenant Murphy's arm, just under his armpit, to stop the flow of blood. Thank God emergency service taught everybody to be EMTs, because you knew what to do for these people, these guys. And I clamped down on his arm, and me and Steve walked him down to the street, and we brought him over to an ambulance that had been abandoned. I guess abandoned during the first collapse. And we brought him over to the ambulance and went in the back, and we got some gauze and some wrap, and we started putting his arm back together and wrapping it up the best we could standing there. Yeah, and Steve, after his arm was wrapped up, Steve went back to his guys, and at that point, Danny Richards came down and approached me at the back of the ambulance, and he says, my curtain needs a backboard. And I said, all right. I said, hold on. And I reached it, and the ambulance still had a backboard in it. One of the orange plastic the orange backboards. And I pulled it out, and I handed it to Danny. And Danny standing there for a couple seconds. And he says, "You gonna come back up?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll be there in a minute." Not that he needed me with him or anything, but he was just wondering what I was doing. And I said, just as soon as I get this lieutenant out of here, and Lieutenant Murphy says, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm going back up there." And I was like, "Yeah, no, you're not. You can't go back up there. You need to leave. You need to go to the hospital." And he was like, "No, he said, "I'm going back." And I was like, no, you really can't." And at that point, Kevin Barry pulled up, and I believe Brian Hearn was in the van at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Listen, can you get this lieutenant out of here? He needs to get to the hospital. Can you get him to an ambulance or get him to a hospital or something? He really needs to go." And they said, "Yeah, no problem." And at that, I looked over to my right, and through the hazy dust floating in the air, I saw the orange backboard crossing the street. So I get him situated and into the van, and they take off, and I head over to the escalator to go back up. And as I get on the escalator, you felt a rumble. You felt it before you heard it, and then you could hear the booming of it coming down. You could hear one floor. The booming that everybody keeps saying, all these conspiracy theorists saying that there were other bombs in the building and stuff. They should really put a rubber band around their heads and snap the hell out of it. The booming that they heard, or the floors collapsing on top of each other. The building was doing exactly what it was supposed to do, which was collapse down on top of each other to a certain point, then stop. And that's what they heard. I turned around and started running. By the time I got away from the escalator, the tower was down. The tower was down in 11 seconds. By that time, that dust cloud kicked up, and it mixed with the 3 inches of dust that was already there. So you had twice the dust in the air. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And I was running towards, I was hoping I was running in the right direction. You couldn't tell where you were going. I was running back towards Vesey and Church Street, which is where I came from. That's where the escalator is on the corner of Vesey and Church. And by the time I got to the street, the cloud engulfed me. It was like somebody threw a blanket over my head. And I tucked my head down, and I just pulled my T-shirt out and stuck my face in it to try and catch some kind of air, because every time I took a breath, my mouth would clog with that crap, and my nose would close off. So I stumbled across, and I found the wall, and I went down Church Street in that dust cloud. And all I was saying to myself was, make it quick. If it's going to happen, please make it quick. Don't bury me, please. And then I was going over in my mind, I could picture what somebody's going to say to my wife, yeah, listen, Joe was, I'm sorry to tell you, but Joe was killed at the World Trade Center. Oh, was he stuck in the collapse? No, he smothered to death 4 blocks away because he wasn't smart enough to get the hell inside the building, But there was nowhere to go. I couldn't see where I was. So I actually stumbled my way. I mean, this is what's going through my mind is how stupid can I be that I smothered to death four blocks away from the place? But I get across, I could see a little bit now through that dust. There were ambulances driving out. I don't know how, never mind smothering in the dust. I'm surprised I didn't get run over by an ambulance running out of there. And I crossed the street and I felt the building again. Now the dust started clearing a little bit, and I was able to see where I was going. I was heading towards Broadway because Lieutenant Sheehan before that had said that he wanted to meet all the bomb squad guys at City Hall Park. That's where they were supposed to meet up. And that's what I got from Kevin Barry when I put the lieutenant in the van. That's where the lieutenant wanted to meet everybody. And so I started heading towards Broadway, and hopefully in the direction of City Hall Park. And as I'm getting up to Broadway, I look, and I could see two taillights flashing on a car. And I make my way over to it, and I open up the passenger side door, and I fall in. And I bring all that dust and crap into the car with me. And I later found out it was a fire marshal sitting there. And as I fall in, now I'm spitting this stuff all over his car. And I'm covered in crap, and I can hardly see. And I'm apologizing to the guy because I'm getting his car filthy. It was a Chevy Caprice. Yeah, it's funny the stuff that you remember. It was a Chevy Caprice, but his air conditioner was going, and it felt so good to be in air conditioning, And I looked at him, and his eyes were the size of saucers. When I fell into his car, they were so big. And he looks at me and he goes, where are you coming from? And I'm like, really? Where am I coming from? I said, I'm heading towards City Hall Park. I said, can you tell me if I'm near it? And he goes, well, and this is what he says, don't hold me to it, but the last time I saw it, it was across the street. And I was like, well, thanks a lot. And I go to get out, and he grabs my arm. He goes, where you going? And I said, I got to go. I got to go to City Hall Park. I got to meet my people.
Briefly, Mike, the flashback of the attack in Brooklyn on 4th Avenue and 38th Street, recently, if the case was in the back of my head, it's certainly in the forefront of it now. And, I still think that, the transit system is vulnerable, and I'm not trying to create fear, but I mean, I would hope that the city and the transit authority is putting more resources into doing things like checking and having better cameras. And, it's always the thing where things happen and they say, oh, the cameras aren't working. Why aren't they working? I mean, what kind of maintenance is going on? I think it's important. I think they need to increase the members of the NYPD that are on the trains. We talked about how it's the lifeblood, and I'm glad to say that now, of course, because the jobs are combined, there is no transit police and housing police. There's only the one police department. I think probably things like this would be done a little bit more efficiently now that we're all under one banner and one team. Because I mean, the reality, Mike, is there is a lot of fiefdoms and there's a lot of in-house fighting with these things, and like most good detectives, we're a bit pushy and we're a bit ego-wise, and it doesn't really help get it done sometimes. So I'm glad he's still in jail. I hope he spends every single day of his sentence in jail. I hate to see him die early. I want him to spend every minute in jail, because the people that he hurt, are probably still suffering from the burns and the trauma of what they went through. So, you know, I hope he enjoys his stay in the state.
Dan?
Well, as always, I'm always impressed with the investigative abilities of our arson and explosion squad. They, you know, Billy says, you know, we push. Yeah, they do. And they come to the truth a lot faster than any other unit I've ever worked with. You know, and that's really the definition of an investigation. Find out the truth, you know, and they do a great job at it.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. You guys do an amazing job as well.
Yeah, well, thank you. You know, as I move further and further away from retirement, and I watch other agencies, I just marvel about how quickly we're able to do our jobs and how well we did them when we had to do them. You know, and I have a great regard for the detective division and a lot of units in there. The other thing I want to say is like. In preparation for this podcast, I read the Daily News article by Al Baker. So Al Baker and a team of almost 15 reporters from the Daily News descended upon this crime scene, and they were able to publish a 16-page spread on this particular incident. And you know what we're missing today? We're missing them investigative reporters, because they also help with these investigations. And if I could bring up one book, you know, you talked about the first World Trade Center bombing. A reporter by the name of Jim Dwyer, along with Deidre Murphy and a couple of other reporters from New York, wrote a book called 2 Seconds Under the World. Terror Comes to America, the Conspiracy Behind the World Trade Center Bombing. That book came out in August of 1997. Having worked the first World Trade Center bombing, I did not know about the entire investigation that the FBI was running until I read Dwyer's book. So, you know, I my hat's off to a lot of great investigators and investigative reporters who actually go out there and do the job and tell our story. You know.
Yeah, that's a very informative book. I've got it here somewhere, but
I need to get it. I need to read it.
Yeah,
great book. But you know, again, and you know what? I miss the newspapers. I miss guys like John Miller going out there and like asking questions that we might have missed, and you know, working with us. Because I think we're all one big team. I hope that we're all working on the same side.
Being a new guy, I was fortunate. I had guys like Joe Patowski, another guy. He helped me immensely. You know, so I was able to sort of get better at it. You know, traditionally, the sergeants in the bomb squad, we sort of run interference. So the guys will always tease us. They'll say, we do all the real work. And in essence, they do. I mean, but there wasn't a sergeant there who had a problem with suiting up, you know, if need be. But you never stepped on the guys, you know.
Right.
They wanted to be there. They wanted to be, you know, be in that suit. As much as I wanted to do it, every once in a while, I remember Tommy Sullivan, another great guy, he'd say, okay, go in the suit. You know, that was for me. That was so I could get better, you know what I mean, at it. See, the more you do these things, no matter what they are, like I used to tell some emergency guys would sometimes tell me, hey, Tone, I'm sorry we called you for this. I go, why are you sorry? I said, every time we respond, right? We respond like it's game day. You're doing it, we're doing it. Because one day they're going to open that box and it ain't going to be good. I said, so, you know, the more we do it, the more bomb techs get into a suit, the better they are in a suit. The more they deal with, sometimes they can't always be in a suit. That's a decision that they have to make. And one thing about, since I traveled around to bomb squads like Paulie's doing now, he'll tell you, they didn't even talk years ago about the hand entry. Only the NYPD did hand entry. And people just say, well, why do you guys have to do that? I said, because you can't get a robot 14 stories up when the elevator ain't working. You know what I mean? You know, they got to do things. I mean, and sometimes you're in a crowd. I think I remember, what was it, St. Patrick's Day? I think it was me, Paulie, Ray, and we had to clear packages on the street. And like Paulie just went to work. There was no getting a bomb suit on. You throw a bomb suit on, and you got 10,000 people there. We basically evaluated it. We did what we had to do, and and you make it work. And like I say, there's no guarantee in anything that a bomb technician does. There's just no guarantee. But thankfully, most of the time, it's nothing. Thankfully.